Week 2 of the Sean Diddy Combs trial is underway, and this time it was Cassie Ventura's mother who took the stand. Ventura, who dated Combs for 11 years, previously testified that the music mogul physically abused her, raped her, and forced her into drug-fueled sexual encounters with male escorts. Now, her mother, Regina Ventura, is corroborating key details, including witnessing some of the alleged abuse firsthand and taking a home equity loan out to wire Diddy $20,000. I'm your host, Kennedi Walker, and you're watching Law and Crime. These images shown to the jury reveal several injuries Cassie Ventura says were caused by Sean Combs. Because of YouTube rules, we have to blur them. But one shows her visibly swollen lip, another shows a bloody cut above her eyebrow. You can also see large, dark bruises on her leg and back. Tuesday, Cassie's mother, Regina Ventura, testified about the abuse, telling the court she took those photos herself to document what her daughter had been going through. Prosecutors then showed an email to the jury. It's an email Cassie sent to her mother and one of Diddy's employees in December of 2011. It said, quote, "The threats that have been made towards me by Sean Puffy Combs are that he is going to release 2 explicit sex tapes of me. One on Christmas Day, maybe before or right after, and another one sometime soon after that. He has also said that he will be having someone hurt me and Scott Miscuddy physically. He made a point that it wouldn't be by his hands. He has actually said that he'd be out of the country when it happened." Cassie's mom testified that when she read this email, she was, quote, "physically sick." Now, this email references Mr. Miscuddy, who is better known by his stage name, Kid Cudi. He and Cassie were dating in 2011 when she was on a break from Mr. Combs. Last week, Cassie testified that Combs found out about the relationship after reading through her emails during a freak-off. She says Diddy allegedly flew into a rage, tried to attack her with a wine bottle opener, and later destroyed the hotel room she had been staying in, covering it with urine and feces. Cassie also told the court that Combs allegedly threatened to blow up Kid Cudi's car and to release 2 explicit videos of her. That brings us back to her mother's testimony on Tuesday, where Regina Ventura echoed many of her daughter's claims. She said after getting the email, Diddy demanded that she pay $20,000 to recoup money that he had spent on her daughter. The prosecutor asked, "Why did you go to the bank and take out a $20,000 loan?" Regina said, "I was scared for my daughter's safety." She was asked what she needed the money for, and she said to pay Sean Combs. And when she was asked why she needed to pay Sean Combs, she testified, "because he demanded it." And it's important to note that at this point in 2011, Diddy is worth millions of dollars, but is allowing the mother of his girlfriend to take out a home equity loan to wire the money. Combs accepted the cash, but then he sent it back days later. The prosecution also questioned Mrs. Ventura about a separate incident in 2016 when she called police on Combs. She was in town to celebrate Cassie's 30th birthday. The prosecutor asked what happened earlier that day. Regina said Casandra, was out with Sean and he stole her phone. She was asked, "How do you know that?" Regina testified, "Because she came and told me and I called the police." The prosecutor asked, "What, if any, interactions did you have with Sean that same day that Cassandra's phone was stolen?" She responded, "We had a bitter argument outside her apartment building." Mrs. Ventura then describes the altercation. She says, "I was yelling, screaming, and trying to hit him." Cassie, she says, wasn't there. She was inside her apartment, and the altercation happened outside of the building. Regina said Combs eventually returned the phone, but took Cassie's car with him as he left. The defense declined to cross-examine Regina, allowing her testimony to stand uncontested. Sean Combs denies all allegations. This is a Law and Crime legal alert. If you received Depo-Provera birth control shots and were later diagnosed with a brain or spinal tumor called mesangioma, you may be eligible for a lawsuit. Morgan & Morgan is investigating claims that patients weren't properly warned about this risk. It's free to check, takes just a few minutes, and you don't have to pay unless they win. So scan the QR code on your screen, click the link below, or go to forthepeople.com/LCDepo to see if you qualify. And here to unpack the emotional and potentially pivotal testimony from Cassie Ventura's mother is litigator Rich Schoenstein. Rich, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Good to see you.
So, Regina Ventura told the jury that she took photos of her daughter's injuries and even paid Sean Combs $20,000 after he allegedly threatened to release explicit videos. From a legal standpoint, how significant is her testimony?
I don't know how significant it is as a legal matter. I think it emotionally packs a wallop that could be effective from the jury. I think you accomplish a whole bunch of different things by putting her on the stand, including this really weird story about how her daughter shows up with bruises and then Combs wants money, which makes absolutely no sense. Why would he need money from Cassie Ventura's mother? And then she sends him money. I mean, there's a lot there substantively, but I think the point of her testimony is far beyond that.
And you make a good point there. I mean, why would Sean Combs need the money? Back then, he was worth tens of millions of dollars. He's now worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Why would he need a payment of $20,000 from his girlfriend's mother? Do you think that that was just a part of control?
Yeah, it's a power move. It has nothing to do with needing money. It has nothing to do with the amount of cash. In fact, I gather he sent it back. But that is supportive of the prosecution's theory that this is somebody who exerts power in his relationships. And so that's what I think it's about.
And she says, Regina Ventura says that she made the payment to protect her daughter. Does that move the needle in terms of proving coercion or extortion?
Well, I don't know that it's significant enough act to prove extortion by itself. I think it is one brick in this story of control and coercion that the prosecution is building. I think it's helpful. I don't think by itself it would amount to that.
And one thing that I found to be, interesting is that the defense did not cross-examine Mrs. Ventura. Could that be a strategy, or does it signal anything about how her testimony landed?
Yeah, well, let me tell you a little bit more, I think, to put it in context about why I think you called the mother, because there is this story about the check, there's evidence of bruises, there's evidence that she saw signs of physical abuse, and that's all great. But really, I think the point of calling Cassie Ventura's mother so soon after Cassie testified herself is to humanize her for the jury, because the jury might be thinking that Cassie is a recording star in her own right. She was seeking fame and riches. She was in this. She's kind of on a different planet than the average juror. So you bring in mom. This is not just another recording star. This is somebody's daughter, right? That's a way to get to the jury. That's a way to make the jury think, what if this happened to your daughter? Here's Cassie's mother who is remembering the details of this story, some of which were more than a decade old, and is here to tell the jury about it. She is validating Cassie's testimony. She is bolstering Cassie. She's giving her, infusing her with credibility all through the mother. And on top of it, to get back to your question, Kennedy, you can't cross-examine her. How are you going to cross-examine mom? What are you going to ask her? It's not time for a Perry Mason moment. She didn't say enough about Combs that would be really, really damaging or off base, or that she wouldn't have known about. She's only testifying about flat out facts that she observed. There's nothing to cross-examine her on, and I think it's really smart. Sometimes you get a witness up there, they say what they say, you don't like it, but you don't have a lot to do about it, and the best thing you can do is let them be done. So now mom is done.
Absolutely. And the prosecution, they showed an email that Cassie emailed her mother in December of 2011, and they read it out loud. Basically, it's when Cassie said that, hey, Sean Combs, he is threatening to release two sex tapes of me. And the prosecution, they asked Mrs. Ventura, how did she feel about that when she read it? And she said that she was horrified. And I think that's important, especially as you mentioned, they were trying to humanize Cassie, get her mother on the stand. What mother wouldn't be horrified when their daughter reaches out saying that their boyfriend may release these two tapes? So I definitely understand what you're saying there. She also described an incident in 2016 where she says that Combs stole Cassie's phone right after a fight. She says she called the police. How does that factor into the prosecution's efforts to establish a pattern of abuse?
Well, I think all of it together is actually doing more than I would have anticipated the mother could do in establishing that. So you have the story about the money, you have the story about him threatening to release sex tapes, and now you have the story about the stealing of the phone. And these are all things that the mother knew about at the time that they happened. So these aren't things that are only coming out in a litigation years later because the government finds it useful. These were things that were happening to Cassie that she was reporting to her mother or her mother was involved in at the time. And they do, when you look at it, they do paint a picture of a very controlled and arguably abusive relationship.
And the prosecution asked Regina, well, what did you do when this was going on? And she admitted she tried to hit Combs during that altercation. Could something like that affect her credibility with the jury, or is that, again, just humanizing her as a mom?
I don't think that hurts her credibility. I think that helps her credibility that she was angry about it and took a swipe at the guy. And you know, parents are in a tough situation when they have a son or a daughter in a relationship that they don't like, or in a relationship that's an abusive relationship, or a whole bunch of other things. So I don't think the jury would really expect her to have done more about it. But the fact that she did that, the fact that she wrote a check, the fact that she took a swipe at him, those indicate really emotional reactions at the time these events were occurring. And that only makes it more likely that they happened.
Right. And let's just dive a little bit more into that, because we know that the prosecution says that this wasn't just about isolated abuse. They're alleging a whole network of exploitation. If you could break down just how Regina's testimony supports that larger narrative, because there are some people questioning, why was she on the stand? How does this prove, that Sean Combs is guilty of RICO and his other charges? And yes, maybe it may be domestic violence, but how does it really bring the whole case together?
Yeah, well, it doesn't bring the whole case together. And when you watch a case like this that's going to last a couple of months and it's going to have dozens and dozens of witnesses, there's only a few witnesses, like Cassie herself, that are really going to tie a lot of pieces together. Most of the witnesses are only going to offer a morsel or two. So, and the abuse part of this case, right? They have that tape. They have the tape of the incident in the hotel that's really graphic and hard to watch and definitely demonstrates abuse. And the prosecution's point is that's not a one-off. That's just the time we got it on tape. But this kind of thing happened all the time, physical and emotional. Here are some examples. Here are bruises 10 years ago. Here's a story about requiring a financial payment. Here he is stealing her phone. And so the mother can bring in a few of those pieces. She's not there to prove a RICO violation. She can't testify about what the prosecution is calling Sean Holmes' criminal enterprise, but she can pinpoint some of these individual predicate acts or partial predicate acts of physical abuse, emotional abuse. That's all she's there for.
And speaking of that physical abuse, there are photographs that Regina says she took of Cassie's bruises, her swollen lip. How powerful can photographic evidence like that be in a case like this one?
Well, it's powerful. It's really critical, right? Because otherwise, you have the testimony of the victim, which might be discounted as a he said, she said thing. You have some corroborating testimony from people like the mother who say, I saw bruises, or there's another witness who says, I heard them fighting and yelling in the next room, or I witnessed a beating. You have some witnesses like that. But jurors like to see real solid evidence and videos of actual abuse, photos of the results of abuse. That's very powerful. That's very powerful evidence.
And just to clarify, threats to release explicit videos, if proven, could that qualify as a federal offense?
I think so. I think that is a form of extortion. I think that could be a predicate act in and of itself. Yeah.
And we still have a ways to go, right? We were just talking about this. 6, 7 weeks left in this trial. This case is bringing in a lot of witnesses, former employees, bodyguards, even dancers. What is the prosecution just trying to establish with that wide range of testimony?
Well, as we've been talking about this, the prosecution has a lot of ground to cover. So the prosecution has to establish that Combs used a criminal enterprise to conduct his criminal activity, because this is all dressed up as a RICO claim, right? Nobody has any question that there was physical abuse here and other abuse that is probably illegal. But the charge in this case is conspiracy to commit RICO violations and trafficking of prostitution and simple abuse, no matter how bad it is, no matter how graphic it is, doesn't establish all of the elements of those claims. So the prosecution has to have a lot of different witnesses to establish. First of all, they want to establish that he did these kind of things not just to Cassie, who he has a relationship with, but to other people. That this is his method of dealing with people. He uses control, he uses threats, he uses force. They want to show that that's a pattern of his conducted over a long period of time, using his enterprise and all the people who work for him to help him perpetrate. That's what they want to show. And, it's very, then they've got to connect it all the end and explain to the jury why it amounts to a RICO violation. That's the really hard part in this case.
And one of the witnesses that recently took the stand was Mr. Combs' former assistant. He made some serious claims, including stories of drug use. He mentioned seeing Mr. Combs with guns and things of that nature. How important is that evidence in connecting him with the criminal enterprise?
So I think it helps paint the picture, but I don't think it surprises anybody that there was drug use here. These are very wealthy people in the entertainment industry, so there's going to be some drug use. I don't think it's a shock that there were guns involved. There's no claim in this case that they were in possession of illegal weapons that I know about. So they have guns, they have money, they use drugs, they have prostitutes. I mean, that's not going to be the ordinary way of life for the people sitting on this jury, but they're going to understand that this is another world, and those things standing by themselves don't prove any criminal activity.
Right. Well, this case has drawn comparisons to other celebrity trials, even R. Kelly's. Do you see any legal parallels here?
Well, I think there are some parallels. The big difference is the R. Kelly case largely involves minors, and that's a big difference, because those acts can't be consensual because there are minors involved. So that's a whole different ballpark as far as I'm concerned. This case involves activities with adults that may not be like anything the people on the jury have seen or participated in, but could still be consensual, which affects the rest of the case. So I think it's a little bit different from the R. Kelly case in that regard.
Well, let's talk consequences. If Combs is convicted on these federal charges, what is he facing?
Uh, well, I can't break it down. We need a chart and a paper and pen to break it down for you. But he's facing the rest of his life in jail for these. I mean, if you put all these charges together, if he gets convicted, especially of the RICO stuff, he would probably spend the rest of his life in jail.
Right. And Mr. Combs has, denied all of these allegations. He actually just brought on a new attorney. This makes the 10th in his massive legal defense. How does that affect how prosecutors build a case like this when you're dealing with someone that has an extreme amount of resources?
Yeah, it makes it difficult. The prosecutors, as a general matter, prosecutors have way more resources than the people they prosecute. Right? There are a lot of people in the criminal justice system who can't afford a lawyer and have to use one that's provided for them from some sort of legal aid or something like that. Or they do afford a lawyer, they can't afford a team of lawyers like Sean Combs has. So it is you're going up against much stiffer competition. I don't think just the number of lawyers on the other side really matters that much. The question is, who are they? And I know that Sean Combs has some very good criminal defense lawyers on his team. So that is a burden for the prosecution to survive all of that. The great thing about having a lot of different lawyers on your defense team is you can divvy them up to give them different tasks. It's really hard if you're litigating a case that's going to go on for 2 months, to do every witness, right? One lawyer can't be prepared every day for every witness to do every cross-examination. I think that's too much to ask of one lawyer to do. And also, frankly, I think the jury gets sick of hearing from the same person over and over and over again. And I also think you want to bring different lawyers to different witnesses. Like they've been very strategic. They made a strategic choice about who would cross-examine Cassie, and they're going to make strategic choices like that. What lawyer would be most effective with what witness? So having a unlimited defense budget, as I assume is the case here, really opens up the possibility of having a defense team that can address everything, in a good, on-point fashion.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And but I have to ask you before I let you go. Again, we have weeks and weeks and weeks left of this trial. What are you watching for as the trial continues? Anything that could potentially turn the tide?
Well, I think the evidence already is pretty startling in terms of his misbehavior. And the defense owned that in their opening statement. You're probably not going to like this guy with everything you hear in the trial. And I think that that's already proven to be the case. It's hard to find him lovable after everything you've heard about. What I'm watching for is something very specific, which is how they tie it all together to make a RICO case. That is as we've talked about before, that's a statute that was really enacted to address organized crime, meaning criminal enterprises that are generating profits through their criminal activities, like the mafia, most famously, right? And they're trying to use that to go after Diddy. And I'm not sure they quite have it, because I'm not sure that this was an enterprise that existed for the purpose of committing criminal acts. I don't know. It still seems like a bit of a stretch. So that's what I'm most interested in. But, I'm a lawyer. I'm interested in lawyer stuff. I know a lot of people are just interested in seeing the videos.
Absolutely. Well, with 7 weeks left, I'm sure the prosecution will be bringing in more witnesses that will probably show those claims. We will all be watching and waiting and just ready to see, what this case brings. But Rich, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks for having me on. Take care.
Sean Combs denies all allegations. For all of the Diddy trial coverage, you can watch our live shows every weekday at 12 noon Eastern and continue to follow our uploads here right on the Law and Crime YouTube channel. For Law and Crime, I'm Kennedi Walker.